The small town of Ravenswood was cloaked in perpetual mist, its narrow streets winding through shadowy alleys and past ancient buildings with crumbling facades. Few dared to wander its streets after dark, for the town carried a sinister reputation. At the heart of this ominous place stood the Blackthorn Manor, an imposing structure that loomed over the town like a dark sentinel. Blackthorn Manor had been abandoned for decades, yet stories about it thrived. Some claimed to hear whispers from its empty halls. Others swore they saw ghostly figures in the windows. It was said that the last inhabitants, the enigmatic Blackthorn family, had vanished overnight, leaving behind only cryptic symbols scrawled on the walls. The legend of the Blackthorn family was the kind that sent shivers down spines. They were believed to have dabbled in forbidden arts, summoning forces beyond human comprehension. The townsfolk whispered of rituals, sacrifices, and a curse that sealed their doom. But those were only tales, or so everyone thought. One fateful evening, a group of college students arrived in Ravenswood, seeking thrills and adventure. Among them were Emma, a curious historian, Mark, a skeptical journalist, Rachel, an aspiring photographer, and Liam, a self-proclaimed skeptic. They had heard of Blackthorn Manor and decided to explore it, convinced that the stories were nothing more than superstitions. As the group approached the manor, the air grew colder, and the mist seemed to thicken. The massive iron gates creaked open with a sound that echoed through the silence. Beyond lay a garden overgrown with twisted vines and dead trees, leading to the manor's imposing front doors. Despite their initial bravado, the friends hesitated, a sense of foreboding settling over them. "It's just an old house," Mark said, trying to mask his unease. "Let's get this over with." Emma pushed open the doors, which groaned in protest, revealing a grand yet decaying foyer. The air inside was heavy, tinged with a metallic scent. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung like veils from the ceiling. Rachel raised her camera, snapping pictures as they moved further inside. They explored room after room, each more unsettling than the last. Strange symbols adorned the walls, their meanings unknown. In the library, they found shelves filled with ancient, leather-bound books. Emma picked up one with a peculiar emblem on its cover and began flipping through its pages. "These are spells," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Rituals, incantations. This is no ordinary book." Liam scoffed. "Come on, Emma, it's probably just some old fiction. People love to make things up." But as they continued their exploration, the atmosphere grew heavier. Unexplained noises echoed through the halls, faint whispers, the creak of footsteps, and distant laughter. Rachel swore she saw a shadow dart across the hallway. But when they investigated, they found nothing. In the basement, they discovered a ritual chamber. Candles, long since extinguished, surrounded a pentagram etched into the stone floor. In the center lay a book, the same emblem as the one Emma had found in the library. Mark picked it up, and a sudden gust of wind extinguished their flashlights. "What the hell was that?" Rachel exclaimed, her voice shaking. The air seemed to vibrate, and the walls began to hum with an eerie resonance. Emma felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the pentagram was glowing faintly. "We need to leave," she urged, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now!" But it was too late. The doors slammed shut with a deafening crash, and the room was plunged into darkness. A voice, deep and guttural, echoed around them. "You have trespassed," it growled, "and now you will pay the price." Panic set in as the friends scrambled to find a way out. The walls seemed to close in, and the symbols began to glow with a sinister red light. Mark tried to open the book, but the pages were blank, save for one line: "Blood shall awaken the slumbering." Suddenly, shadows materialized around them, taking the shape of grotesque figures with hollow eyes and jagged smiles. The friends screamed as the entities advanced, their skeletal hands reaching out. Emma, clutching the first book, realized they needed to perform a ritual to escape. "We need to reverse it," she shouted. "The book! It's the key!" With trembling hands, she read aloud from the text, her voice steady despite the chaos. The shadows recoiled, their forms flickering like dying flames. But as she spoke the final words, the pentagram flared, and a deafening roar filled the chamber. The friends awoke outside the manor, gasping for air. The sun was rising, casting its light over the cursed estate. But the scars of their experience remained. Emma's hands bore the symbols she had read aloud, now etched into her skin. Mark's voice was hoarse, his words barely audible. Rachel's camera contained photos she didn't remember taking, images of the shadows and a figure standing in the pentagram center. And Liam, the skeptic, was now silent, his eyes haunted. Blackthorn Manor stood as it always had, but the friends knew the truth. The curse was real, and the horrors within its walls were far from over. As they left Ravenswood, the whispers of the townsfolk followed them, a chilling reminder that some stories should never be disturbed. Yet deep in the manor's shadows, something stirred. The book lay open in the ritual chamber, its pages turning as if by an unseen hand. The symbols glowed faintly, and a low, menacing laugh echoed through the empty halls, promising that the darkness had only just begun. Days turned into weeks, yet the terror of Blackthorn Manor clung to them like a second skin. Emma spent sleepless nights researching the symbols etched into her hands, their glow visible only under moonlight. The markings seemed alive, pulsating faintly as if tethered to some unseen force. She discovered connections to ancient texts, whispering of soul-bound seals and unbroken pacts. Mark, once a staunch skeptic, found himself revisiting the recordings from that night. Strange, distorted voices appeared in the audio, voices that hadn't been there before. One phrase repeated over and over: "They are watching." Rachel, unable to shake the images burned into her camera, developed the photos in a fit of desperation. Amidst the familiar faces of her friends were images of shadowy figures, some leaning inches from their oblivious forms. One photograph, however, froze her blood. A clear depiction of a towering figure with hollow eyes and a skeletal grin, standing in the pentagram's center. Behind it, faint tendrils of darkness reached toward her lens. Liam's silence grew unbearable. Once the group's loudest skeptic, he now barely spoke. He avoided mirrors, claiming he saw something else in his reflection. His nights were plagued by vivid nightmares of being dragged back to the manor, whispers urging him to complete the offering. Their shared trauma bound them, but it also drove them toward unraveling the mystery. They met in secret, poring over books Emma borrowed from obscure libraries and tomes from local occultists. The answer they sought was buried in fragments of folklore and forbidden knowledge. The manor wasn't merely haunted, it was a gateway. According to their findings, the Blackthorn family had attempted to bridge the veil between worlds. The ritual chamber was a focal point, designed to channel immense energy, to open a door to the other place, a realm of shadows and forgotten souls. The friends had inadvertently reignited the dormant ritual, making them unwilling participants in the Blackthorn's unfinished work. To sever their connection, they needed to return to the manor. But this time, they would not be alone. A local historian, Mr. Carver, offered his reluctant assistance. He had studied Ravenswood's dark history and claimed to know of a counter-ritual. But, he warned, the cost may be steep. Armed with newfound knowledge and makeshift weapons, iron rods, salt, and lanterns, the group braced themselves for another night in Blackthorn Manor. As they crossed the threshold, the air grew heavy and the temperature plummeted. The walls seemed to pulse, alive with an unnatural rhythm. In the ritual chamber, the pentagram glowed faintly, awaiting their return. Mr. Carver began the incantation, his voice steady despite the oppressive atmosphere. Shadows writhed at the edges of the room, their shapes growing more defined with each passing moment. The ritual required the group's unity. Each person had to stand at a specific point of the pentagram, their energies forming a counterbalance to the gateway's pull. As they took their positions, the room erupted in chaos. The shadows screamed, their voices merging into a deafening cacophony. The floor beneath them cracked, revealing a swirling abyss. Liam faltered, his fear overwhelming him. A shadow lunged, its tendrils wrapping around his ankle. Rachel screamed as she reached for him, but the entity was too strong. "Finish the ritual!" Liam shouted, his voice breaking as he was dragged toward the void. Tears streaming down her face, Emma chanted the final words. The symbols on her hands burned brightly, their light piercing through the darkness. The pentagram flared one last time before collapsing into itself, sealing the gateway. The room fell silent. The friends collapsed, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and grief. Liam was gone, his sacrifice the final piece needed to close the door. They left Blackthorn Manor for the last time, their hearts heavy with loss. The shadows no longer pursued them, but the scars remained. They had survived, but at a cost none of them could have foreseen. The manor stood in silence, its secrets buried once more. But deep within its heart, a faint laugh echoed, a reminder that some doors once opened are never truly closed.